Hello and welcome back to my channel. Today I am on at my self-sufficient surface colony, and I'm going to be launching a large craft that will descend into the atmosphere of Novin and deploy an inflatable balloon and explore the atmosphere of Novin. The craft will then drop the heat shield, the habitation segment, and the large balloon, and the rest will ascend all the way back into orbit of Novin. This requires a very high thrust and high efficiency rocket with multiple stages. The Ascent rocket will use metal hydrogen for propulsion, which has high efficiency and high thrust. The metal hydrogen engines have an ISP of 1650 seconds in a vacuum. At about 40 kilometers in Novin's atmosphere, the craft will have a thrust-to-weight ratio of just 1.28. However, this will rise very quickly as we ascend into the thinner air. Being that the Ascent rocket is using metal hydrogen, it has a total weight of just under 200 tons, despite its very large size. With the habitation segment and booster, the entire thing weighs 1,100 tons. Under Kerbin's gravity, the Ascent vehicle has a huge thrust-to-weight ratio of 3.1. There will be 6 brave Kerbals that will be taking this daring journey into the atmosphere of one of the most violent environments known to Kerbal kind. The velocity needed to be in a low Novin orbit is over 9,000 meters per second. Hence why we need a very large and very efficient rocket to get back into orbit. The atmospheric entry and descent into Novin's atmosphere takes quite a while. The atmosphere of Novin starts at about 253 kilometers. The craft enters the atmosphere of Novin at a whopping 13 kilometers per second, and in just a few minutes it decelerates all the way to subsonic speeds. The surface pressure gets up to 100 bar, which is pretty normal for a gas giant. The gravity of Novin is 1.9 g. This will definitely be a challenge for the Kerbals to overcome, as they are used to just 1 g. Walking around in the spacecraft or climbing up and down the ladder will probably be kind of difficult. As you can see, the atmospheric entry into Novin is quite intense, but we eventually make it down to the surface. We will start by leveling off just above the cloud layer, and the Kerbals can get out of their launch positions. They take a look out the window and try not to think about the gargantuan pit below them. The Kerbals will stay at Novin for a couple days before ascending back to orbit. The Kerbals venture deeper into Novin, the atmosphere pressure builds, and the visibility becomes poor. As we descend into the thick clouds of water, our visibility drops significantly. Now low enough in the atmosphere and also slow enough, the crew can get out of their launch positions and move into the habitat. At this point, at about 10 kilometers in altitude, the pressure outside is nearly 50 atmospheres. Now I will give you a quick tour of the habitat using the free IVA mod. Although it wasn't really necessary, the habitat does have a small greenhouse. There are several points for observation, and there is a small science lab. As we leave Novin, we will move the crew back into the Ascent rocket, and the habitat and heat shield will be dropped. With hurricane-force winds and lightning in every direction, the Kerbals decide they don't want to stay here too long. The hull of the craft starts to make all kinds of noises from the metal being twisted and crushed. The crew feels that they could be in a submarine under the oceans of Kerbin, which would probably be a less precarious situation to be in anyways. As we begin to descend into the underworld of the clouds of Novin, the wind and lightning just gets more intense, and it makes the Kerbals a little uneasy. The crew start to do all kinds of science experiments, from the materials bay, mystery goo, and thermometer and pressure readings. However, the sound of the atmosphere crushing their craft like a tin can prevents them from focusing all too well. As we do some science experiments, I will let you pause the video if you want to see what the science definitions are like on Novin. As we scan the atmosphere, we find that it is mostly made up of hydrogen and helium. However, there are pretty high trace amounts of helium-3 and deuterium, which is very useful to collect for fuel in a fusion reactor or for fusion rocket engines. After completing their science experiments and taking notes of the characteristics of Novin's atmosphere, the crew will take some time to simply sit and enjoy their time in Novin's atmosphere. It's not every day that you get to go to the surface of one of the biggest gas giants known to Kerbal kind. After spending just one day in the terrifying atmosphere of Novin, the crew will prepare to go back to orbit. And now it's time to drop the heat shield and disconnect from the balloon and fire up our engines to go to orbit. The balloon actually carried us quite a bit higher than I had expected, so we will probably have no problem getting into orbit. And so the starting thrust-to-weight ratio is significantly higher than I had initially planned. With this very fast acceleration, our ascent into orbit only takes a couple minutes. Although it's not too comfy for the Kerbals because they are experiencing over 5 Gs of acceleration. But this is necessary to escape Novin's nearly 2 Gs of gravity. And with that, we are back in orbit of Novin. That's all for this video. I hope you enjoyed or found this interesting, and thank you for watching.